I definitely missed that opportunity. Please know that although we are virtual, that our team is really excited to be here and to share some information with you, and excited for us to learn together. As we get started, I do want to share just a little bit about my own personal journey. I know that you may know this, but I do see a few faces on the call. Prior to my coaching career, right here in Durham Public Schools, I went to Parkwood in Lowe's Grove. And after my mother finished graduate school, we ended up moving to Burlington, and I graduated from a high school there. But I went to Appalachian State University, and my degree is in chemistry with a major in physics and secondary education, and taught high school chemistry, all levels, and advanced placement chemistry while I was at Page High School. And, you know, the story and the journey of what we have heard from the families in the video, but also from many of our children, is really personal for me. It is so important that our students have the opportunity to enjoy their academic learning, which means we have a responsibility to challenge them in all areas, not just academics, but most importantly also academics. So I want to make sure that you know that it's important to us, it's important to our superintendent, Dr. Mabinga. Our board, I'm going to talk a little bit later, has approved addendum strategies specific to the area of advanced academics. So it's important to them that we continue this journey. And to the point of many of the parents that we saw, we've got some work to do. Although we have made some progress, we have some work to do in the area of transparency and in the area of communication, so that we can ensure each of our children has access to rigorous courses. So whatever they desire to occur when they leave high school, whether it's employability here in Durham or beyond, whether it's our armed forces, whether it's institutions of higher education, they don't have any barriers, because we have prepared them to do just what their hopes and dreams would be when they graduate. Dr. Bullock, if you'll go to the next slide, please. We've got a couple of, this kind of just takes you through our agenda. We're not going to spend as much time, because Ms. Gunn has already kind of set for us to some degree what we've done previously. We'll talk about our current state, our desired state. We want to make sure that we continue to encourage parent advocacy. I also, if appropriate, I know that you guys are collecting questions. If you would like our team to be able to respond to questions, whether in the chat or into another place, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to do that. We have enough team members to make sure that we're responsive to your needs this evening. Dr. Bullock, we'll go to the next slide. So here, Ms. Gunn has talked a little bit about some of the things that we have done in the past, but we have, when we met with you, we did have an opportunity to share some of the increases in proficiency, our decreased teacher turnover. We also provided an update regarding our professional learning. Dr. Bullock's going to speak to that later in the presentation, but it's so important that as we do this work, that we really have an opportunity to work with our teachers and helping them understand the implicit bias that they bring into the classroom, to ensure that our classroom settings are a safe space for our children to grow and learn, and that we are encouraging our students with all that we do. Words matter. How we talk to children matter. The experiences that we provide to children matter. And it's so important that our teachers are aware of that, because it does impact how our children believe in themselves as they go through their daily experience with our Durham Public Schools. We also reviewed data regarding advanced academics. That's fine, Dr. Bullock. You can go right on to the strategic plan. It's my love for us to talk about that. There are many folks on this call who participated in the development of our strategic plan. And I think it's important for us to note, we have some core beliefs that group really wanted to make sure set the foundation for the work that we do. And that first core belief is around equity. And so it is critically important that as we think about the data that was shared, that we ensure that our advanced academic classrooms should look like the demographics of the school in Durham Public Schools. We have some work to do in that area. I also want to speak to high expectations. It is so important that we embrace a growth mindset and ensure that every student has the opportunity to excel globally and to reach their highest potential. And when you think about some of the comments that we heard in the video, it's so important that when we're having conversations with our students, that we're setting the tone for the highest level of course that they have the opportunity to take in that particular grade level. And if that highest level is math too, then we need to talk to our students and families about that course and ensuring that our students have the strategies and tools to do so. And in the event that they don't, what are we going to do to scaffold to make sure that our children have that opportunity and not limiting the opportunities that we put in front of our children or our families. If you'll go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, our board approved our strategic plan, and as we were doing the work, the philosophy that we have with Dr. Mabinga and with our community is our strategic plan is a living document. And one of the things that we recognized is there were some areas where we needed to make sure that we named them, that we called them out so that we were being very clear about the work that we were doing, because it made a difference, not only in meeting the strategic plan goals, but for the work that we were doing with our children and our students and our staff. In many of those areas, we have strategic plan addendum strategies in the area of special education for our multilingual resource center, and as well as in the advanced academics area. And I encourage you, I know many of you do right now, our meetings are Zoom, but I encourage you to participate and listen to our Zoom meetings, because this is an area where our board, we are actually engaged in conversations regarding equity at every single board meeting. One of the things that you will note in our strategic plan addendum regarding advanced academics is that we have really tried to make sure that we are promoting and ensuring that our AIG specialists have an opportunity to work with our students and help with their schedules, that the practices that we have with advanced academics, that we are ensuring that those practices are moving throughout the school, not in isolation, and that we're being very careful to make sure that we ensure equitable access in terms of making sure the learning opportunities that our students will have as they move forward. Next slide. Here we'll provide some addendum updates. So how are we progressing? Every 3 years, we have the responsibility to develop an AIG plan, and that plan has to be board approved and then is sent to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. That's a collaborative plan where we bring together and look at feedback from students, from teachers, from parents, and from our community. And as we were working to revise this most recent AIG plan, one of the things that is a clear focus is equity and academic pursuit, and really making sure that we are enriching the services, not just at the elementary level, but really throughout kindergarten through 12th grade, so that students do have access to those courses. We have some expanded opportunities for our AP Summer Scholars Camp and our professional learning communities. And that's where our teachers work together with our AIG specialists to make sure students have access to courses. Excuse me. Some of the things that are in progress that I do want to note is that we have provided some allotments to our high schools. And these high school AIG specialists, it's their responsibility to work in collaboration with our counselors to ensure that we have not missed any students that need to be in upper level courses, our honors, our advanced placement courses, or our international baccalaureate courses. Mr. Futrell is going, and Ms. Ward Satterfield are going to speak to that partnership between the specialists and the counselors later in the presentation. We also want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and checking back. And so one of the things that I think is important, and I want you all to know, is that we have a responsibility to make sure we're accountable for what we share. So if the expectation is that students are being enrolled in those AP and IB courses, then we need to make sure that we have course audits to make sure that we are looking at that data on a regular basis to ensure that there is appropriate follow through with what we are expecting to occur in our classrooms. Working very closely when we think about next steps is making sure that that partnership with our high school AIG specialists and our principals and counselors are really creating that synergy to ensure students have access. One of the things that will be coming to you very soon is a parent guide around for selection. We've been working on this. We heard you loud and clear when we had our previous workshop, when we were able to gather together, and just making sure that there's some clear transparency in terms of recommendations for student courses. And so we want to make sure that we are sharing that with our parents and families. Also, it's clear that we need to make sure that we eliminate any barriers that are keeping our children from accessing those upper level classes. So making sure that we're being very thoughtful about any prerequisites or course recommendations that we may have that are unnecessary and ultimately hinder the opportunity for our children to move forward in those upper level courses. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bullock. I'm going to come back at the end of the presentation. And again, I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to come with you today and to learn together.
All right, so good evening, everyone. I'm going to speak briefly to our current state and some of the work that's been occurring since we last came together as a large group back in September. So since the last time we organized for our Black Parent Empowerment Workshop, some of the work that we have done is around monitoring and analyzing enrollment trends for students of color and their ability to access advanced academic opportunities. So we understand that monitoring and accountability are major parts of making sure that the goals that we want to reach come to fruition. Because as we all know, what gets inspected is respected. So we've been doing a lot of work in supporting our schools, our school leaders, our teachers, and our counselors to really pay attention to what's going on with the trends as far as students enrolling in advanced academic opportunities. So one of the ways in which we're doing that is by sharing data that kind of supports this process. Particularly an example of that would be the advanced placement potential data that we have through EVOS, which is a tool for kind of diagnosing the potential that students have based on their prior performance, which can consist of test scores, but other data points that can give us some sort of an indication of how well they might perform in certain classes. So that's just one data point we use in the midst of thinking about student interests, teacher recommendations, etc. But anyway, we use that data point and share it with high school principals and counselors to make sure the students that meet those criteria and are showing data that says that they're likely to perform well in certain classes, we're going out and we're aggressively recruiting them into AP and also IB, or International Baccalaureate classes. So that's one of the things that we're doing. I can tell you that principals are using this data right now to make sure that as they're doing final schedules and everything, as we go into the fall, that they've really pulled in those students whose data shows that they would perform well in some of their advanced classes. We've also, in the spring, we provided our Equity 201 training that focused on identifying and addressing implicit bias and microaggressions in schools. So initially, we intended for this training to be conducted face-to-face. We did the training for all principals in the district, and we gave them resources so that they could replicate this training in their schools. Then COVID hit and we had to reformat our delivery method. So we created an online structure for this, and we had over 2,400 responses to our evaluations to follow this training, and just really insightful things as people thought about, how implicit bias might manifest through them, ways of challenging it in their colleagues, and ultimately ways of making sure we're minimizing bias in its role in advanced academic opportunities, which was actually a specific example that we cited in the training. So some data considerations that we wanted to share. One of the things that we noticed is that from 2018-19 to 2019-20, the percentage of students enrolled in AP, IB classes and in overall advanced classes in high school for Black students actually increased. So I went back and I looked at some of the data that was shared last year. I noticed that we shared AP data, but we did not include IB data, which if we're looking at both of those,
9mm.
excuse me. Excuse me. So if we're looking at both of those in tandem, which is very important because with our IB program being at Hillside High School, we see that there are a number of Black students who get that IB opportunity at Hillside. And so that data plays a big part in looking at access to advanced academic opportunities in the district. So we like to look at those things in parity because they also weigh the same in terms of college credits. So if we look at that data, we did see a slight increase in AP and IB enrollment from 2018-19 to 2019-20. We also noticed that the overall enrollment of Black students in high school continues to decrease. So it's very important that as we see, you know, sometimes very slight increases in AP, IB enrollment, we're seeing larger decreases in Black student enrollment, not only in our high schools, but in our schools in general. So we see in Durham, there's actually a smaller number of school-age Black kids in Durham now than there were years ago. We're down about 3,000 Black students now in our district than where we were 8 years ago. So it's important that as we push for higher enrollment in advanced academic classes, that we also note the decreasing enrollment because that can play a part in some of the data that we see. All right, moving forward to our desired state, I think from here, Ms. Ward Satterfield, will you be speaking to these slides?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Bullock. Good evening again. I'm Tamika Ward Satterfield, the coordinator for the coordinator for school counseling. It's a pleasure to be with the group again. So professional learning is ongoing in these 4 areas to ensure that our professional school counselors are equipped with the content, knowledge, and philosophy of high expectations to ensure all students benefit from equitable access to rigorous courses and extracurricular opportunities. Now, parents, we have heard your concerns and acknowledge that we have not always met this goal 100% of the time. We also acknowledge that when we fail and fall short, students are negatively impacted, and that drives the urgency that we feel to get it right for all students. So in our course selection process, we are working as a team. Curriculum and instruction, advanced academics, student support services, and the Office of Equity Affairs have been working through this process. During this past school year, we made key revisions to the course selection pathways, such as no pathway will depend solely on subjective or inconsistent measures, such as course grades or teacher recommendations. And with teacher recommendations, we are advising that they be used as supplemental data to advocate for student placement. So to that end, we have created a form that helps to quantify and improve consistency in teacher recommendations. Once again, and that those teacher recommendations be used to advocate for student placement in rigorous courses. During this upcoming year, we will continue to improve access in the course selection process by reviewing the alignment of prerequisite courses, particularly in math and science, to remove any unnecessary barriers, and to continue to support teachers, counselors, and principals in applying course selection criteria equitably. Now, for invitation over notification, you all know the feeling that you get when you see a notification for an event, maybe on Facebook, and how that compares to getting a personalized invitation in the mail with your name on it to something that interests you. Well, this is one of the philosophies that we are trying to get across to all of our school counselors: aggressive recruitment. Invitation is always better than notification. We began using this terminology in February of 2019 and have continued to spread this thought throughout our administrative and classroom teacher colleagues. To that end, we use data to ensure equitable access and then personalize the recruitment process and experience for students. And like I said, we also work with our teachers and administrators to not just rely on traditions or volunteers to grant student access to opportunities. For student advocacy, as a group of professional school counselors, we understand that this often means disrupting implicit bias in order to remove barriers to access. We go about an almost monthly professional learning that helps us to reflect on ourselves and review our building level policies and procedures to ensure that we are doing our best to remove barriers through disrupting implicit bias. And school counselors who are leaders have to understand the value of data and understand how to use data. We are creating processes in Durham Public Schools to use data to include students rather than to exclude them. We are encouraging school counselors to share important data with all of their stakeholders. That will help build confidence in their work and their comprehensive school counseling programs. We're using academic and behavioral data to plan those comprehensive school programs, including small groups and classroom lessons. We are using academic predictor data to provide access to advanced courses. We are ensuring that our school counselors have a deep knowledge and understanding of how to use our technology tools in order to ensure that your students have access to rigorous courses like PowerSchool and the Google Suite. And so now I will turn it over to Ms. Chanel Sidbury, who is the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, to discuss advocacy.
Good evening, families and parents. Thank you for inviting us. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the additional layers that we've added in terms of support and advocacy for at-home course selection. So this is a screenshot of something that will be forthcoming to you. As a part of the improvements that Ms. Ward-Satterfield discussed, the Equitable Course Access Guide has enabled us to support and provide professional learning opportunities for our administrators and school counselors prior to engaging in the course selection and registration process. As a continuation of this work, we are in the final stages of developing a parent guide for course selection to accompany the school guide. The school guide is a lot of educational jargon, codes, etc., and we want to make sure that we produce a document that is parent friendly and easy to be accessible and understood at home. The guide will also include specific notes about access, what specific criteria are applicable to certain subjects, such as there is legislation around some of our advanced mathematics placements. And so it is going to be very transparent in making sure we bring forth all of those things. We want to seek parent feedback from our stakeholders in the coming weeks, specifically on the language. Is the language family friendly? We want to make sure that it's free, again, of educational jargon, and so you will get that information so that we can inform this document moving forward. As a part of the parent guide, we are also going to have detailed information about the waiver process. As Ms. Ward-Satterfield mentioned, the waiver process, as people traditionally think about a waiver, it is to give up a right or to absolve themselves for something, and that is the complete opposite. We want to have a waiver process or support process so that teachers and families can advocate on behalf of their students to get them into a placement that is matching the service match for what they need moving forward. There is going to be a flow chart with steps that articulate the appropriate process in the waiver or the waiver form itself. Please do remember that the course waiver is a process that parents can use to request a different course placement other than their students, but the aim of this waiver will be to widen the access to academic services. We're standardizing this process to ensure that all counselors, school personnel, administrators, and district personnel communicate to parents regarding access to the waiver process. The waiver process and the forms are submitted and processed by school principals, and this waiver form is going to be shared with all of you tonight alongside of this presentation, and it will also be a part of the public guide. And our aim right now is August 3rd to make sure this is public facing and available to all families moving forward. I am going to turn it over to, I think, Laura, to talk about questions and discussion.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, so the next part of our presentation, part of what we heard from you was that you wanted direct answers and an overview for different grade levels. If you would, Mr. Bullock.
And well, let me ask a question for clarity to the leaders. We did prepare some thoughts on these different grade bands that were requested of us. Did we want to, share our thoughts on these different grade bands now, or did we want to do that later in the session this evening? We just want to make sure we're meeting the needs.
Yes, so there will be there's a time later for that.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so right now we're gonna have, just you guys can finish up your presentation and then the Q&A with Micah.
Okay, so that actually is the conclusion of our presentation, like this part of it. And
okay.
I think we're ready for Q&A, but I will yield to Dr. Hardy to see if we're ready for that.
Awesome sauce.
Thank you so much. I was trying to monitor the chat. I'm not sure that we got to everything. I did just want to reiterate 2 points as we were closing. We have definitely heard you loud and clear regarding the transparency, and the guide that Ms. Sidbury referenced will be available prior to the beginning of the academic year on the website. We will be sharing with you in PDF form our presentation today, as well as the waiver form. We want to make sure that you have access to that. We know that it is clearly important that you are continuing to advocate for our students. And I just want to reiterate how important this is to us, and not only that, but how important it is for us to make sure that we implement with fidelity. And I've spoken to many of you, so I know that there are some individual situations where that has not been the case. And we have a responsibility to ensure that we do better so that children in Durham that look like me have the opportunity to sit in a class that I would have taught, like AP Chemistry, because they deserve it. And it's very personal for me to ensure that we're creating the conditions for our children to have that access. I'll turn it back over to Ms. Gunn. And we are here for questions. And I'm not sure if there is time appropriate. We also have 2 board members and would want to give them the opportunity, if necessary, to speak to this work and the strategic plan as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Hardy. I'll take it from here. And first, I want to thank everybody for your participation. We really appreciate you taking so much time with us today for this very important topic. I want to pause to just let you know that we are monitoring, and then we'll capture all of your questions and comments in the chat box. So please feel free to put all of your thoughts in there. We will copy it and ensure that we share it with Dr. Hardy and her staff so that we can get some thoughtful and intentional responses, find some themes, and try to organize them in a way that they're easy for us to absorb and understand together. So if you have thoughts, let that be your space to share with us, and we'll gather those and get them back to all of us in a document of some sort very soon after this conversation. So my name is Micah Jeter. I am a parent of a rising 6th grader. She was at Club Boulevard Elementary and is planning to attend Lakewood Montessori, I guess, maybe sorta. I guess she'll be here with me, and but anyway. So the portion of today's meeting that I'm tasked with is to ask some follow-up questions. And we really appreciate you sharing the information that you did. It was really insightful, and I was pleased to see the progress that was made. I'm gonna push you a little bit with some of the questions, and then we'll go from there. So the first one, and I'll allow anyone from Dr. Hardy's team to kind of respond based on who you believe is most appropriate to answer. the question around the increase of numbers in the AIG population of brown or Black students, I heard during the presentation that they increased. I wonder, was it a significant increase or was it nominal? And then if you could talk a little bit about, I wonder about why are we capturing numbers at the high school level when I am curious about what's happening kind of at middle school, 4th grade, and if that tracks through high school, and wonder if kids would have stayed in school longer if they were identified sooner.
So I'm going to just speak really briefly, and then I can turn it over to Dr. Bullock or Dr. Pittman or Ms. Parrott. I did also, and I think that Dr. Bullock did share this, our Director of Advanced Academics and Magnet, that position, Kim Marion was serving in that position and has transitioned to a position in Wake County. And we are currently in the process of hiring for that position and hope over the next few board meetings to make a recommendation to our board. One of the things that we did is we looked at that position and trying to make sure that we were strategic. That was a Director of Advanced Academics and Magnet. And although there is a lot of alignment regarding our Magnet programs, we know that there has to be a very narrow focus on what we're doing with advanced academics and improving and increasing access. So in some realignment, that position is now Director of Advanced Academics. That person is solely responsible for that advanced academics work. We are going through the interview process, and our interview process is quite rigorous. It's 3 rounds. Many of the people on this call are part of that interview process in addition to our school-based staff, so that when we do have a candidate that meets those qualifications and we make the recommendation for approval to our Board of Education, we can speak to some of the things that we know this particular person needs to have those skills so that they can lead this work. So in that person's absence, and we probably should have shared this in the beginning, and I completely apologize, I will yield to Dr. Bullock, Dr. Pittman, as well as Ms. Parrott to address that question. And then hopefully once that person is hired and on board, this group will provide us the opportunity to introduce her to this group so we can make a personal connection.
Thank you.
Yes, and I just want to speak briefly to, that was some of the data that I was sharing. And it was specific to high school because we have received questions, and we've definitely tried to make sure we're monitoring what what those advanced level courses look like, and making sure that Black students of color are getting access to those. So I was speaking specifically to that. It was a pretty small percentage increase of Black representation in those classes. Which is also why I thought it was important to note that Black students were over 50% of the overall enrollment in DPS in high school in 2018-19, and that dropped to about 44%. So that was a 6 percentage point drop just in what the enrollment looked like. So for us to have any type of increase at all in the percentage enrolled in AP and IB is something worth noting. And so I think also the changing demographics of our district can also give us an indication of some of the changes we might be seeing in advanced academics in general. But that's not to say that there's not a lot of work to be done to increase those opportunities for Black students and students of color. But one of the things I've noticed in my work is just to make sure people are aware of what's going on as far as the number of school-age Black children in Durham, because that number is also changing. Ms. Parrott, I don't know if you want to speak to any of the changing numbers with AIG identification. Or
I'm happy to talk about that. So one of the things that with our current numbers, the state headcount is pulled every year on April the 15th. This year, because of the stay-at-home order, we were not able to finish doing our testing for the end of the school year. However, it is really exciting when we look at our total. As of March 1st, we had 4,799 identified students, AIG, in Durham Public Schools. Of those numbers, 2,282 students identify as white, 2,517 of those students identify as non-white. So we really look at that, and that is a substantial difference.
Thank you. I want to just take us back to one of the vignettes that we saw before the presentation, where the mother speaking talked about her son having missed his opportunity to attend early college because of a glitch of an email and some address needing to be confirmed. And although she lived there her whole life, and that's where he'd been to school, so clearly Durham Public Schools knew where they were and they've been there all the time. So could you speak a little bit about, or speak to the process of automating? In your presentation, you spoke about limiting some of those unnecessary barriers to access, and wondered if you could highlight if that's an example of one of those barriers that we could look to see eliminated, because I think that struck all of us quite, strongly.
And I think every vignette that you shared, I either have talked to a parent or family, or even maybe that particular parent or family, or have been aware. And so I will definitely let Dr. Pittman speak to that. But I do think that it's important for this group to know, and for you to share with our parents and families, that the transition, we have a great compilation of team members that Dr. Mabinga has brought together. And when I think about the history that we have with many team members that are on this call that have been with Durham Public Schools for multiple years, as well as some of us that are newer, I feel like it was a coming home for me, but newer to the team, it has really given us the opportunity to be thoughtful and reflective. And some of those very specific barriers, like access to our magnet schools and programming, those barriers have been eliminated. I will let Dr. Pittman speak to that. We also have a new director of student assignment, Melody Marshall, and we would welcome the opportunity to introduce you to her. She's been with Durham Public Schools for quite some time and served in the coordinator of our students with transition, or our McKinney-Vento families. And so that has allowed us to really be very thoughtful about those processes that had a place, but at the same time, as we think about reviewing those processes with an equitable lens, we recognize that some of those were creating barriers that were really hurting our children and families for having access to many of our programs. Dr. Pittman?
Dr. Hardy, you really addressed it beautifully. My heart was hurting when I heard that scenario, and we do not want to repeat things like that. So I can't speak to that specific situation, but let me share some of the safeguards that we've automated and put in place to try to eliminate scenarios like that. As many of you know, we've gone to an online magnet application process, but with that, we've been working with the vendor who helps us to ensure that multiple reminders, email reminders, phone call reminders go out to families at the district level, reminding families that the deadline to accept a magnet seat is now coming. And we've seen that you've been offered a seat, but the family hasn't accepted the seat. And it's our commitment, working with Ms. Marshall in the Office of Student Assignment. She oversees our lottery. She is extremely intentional that families who have offered a seat clearly want their seat, and through clerical issues should not lose a seat because of something as the mother described earlier. We also have staff in every magnet school that is called a magnet coordinator, whose special function is to work to ensure that families who have been offered a seat indeed have been contacted, reached out to, discussed. What are there issues with accessing the acceptance? Are there issues with haven't been able to respond, so that every family, when that deadline hits, has had multiple touch points, personal touch points, so that we are avoiding scenarios that were shared earlier.
Thank you. So we are running out of time, and there are so many like poignant questions flooding the inbox. But before I let us move forward, let me ask an even bigger question, right? Why not? Let's just jump right over the mountain or try. How can we anticipate what's really going to be needed with this new virtual platform that we're getting ready to go back into as it relates to advanced academics? How do we support our kids how do we prepare? Is there any guidance or awareness that you have already that you can share with our group around academically gifted children? And some of them are having a hard time performing as well as they would in person in this virtual platform. And some of us are really worried about how that's going to impact their passion for learning as well as their achievement.
So I will start, and then I'll let Dr. Maddox Perry or Mr. Futrell or Ms. Ward Satterfield speak about some of our social and emotional learning pieces. I just want to acknowledge that we've never been here before. And, you know, this experience has been a challenge, I think, for each of us personally, as we think about our children and how they have been impacted, and we think about our teachers. As you know, our board supported the recommendation, approved the recommendation last Thursday evening for us to begin in the first 9 weeks in Plan C. Our team had already been doing quite a bit of work because in our Plan B recommendation, our high school students were going to be remote. We also had some preliminary planning and working with our teachers. And as we closed the year and preparing for potential remote learning or virtual learning, because we knew we did not want to have a repeat of the abrupt closure that occurred. So prior to our teachers leaving, the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Learning worked to ensure all of our teachers went through 3 professional learning modules to help them learn how to provide instruction in a virtual space. The other piece that we have been doing over the summer is to make sure that we're being very thoughtful about what virtual learning looks like. And there are a couple of pieces that I want to identify, and then I'll turn it over to our support services, and I'll look to Ms. Sidbury just in case I miss a couple of those pieces. The first piece that we think is critically important is that we have a single platform for our students and our families. Many of our families have children in multiple grade levels, and what you experienced when we had our abrupt closure was some of our teachers were using Seesaw, some of them were in Google Classroom. You were trying to manage your own life as a parent, and it was too much. We have made the decision that there is one platform, and that platform is Canvas. The beauty of that is for our earliest learners and our vulnerable students, they are still going to have access to some of those tools that we know are better for our earliest learners, such as Seesaw. The next piece, and I probably should have said this first, and I definitely want to thank our board members as well as DPS Foundation. We also recognize that there was a digital divide. And, you know, just as we think about water and electricity as a right for you to have, we need to think about that in terms of access. And so our board has approved for us to purchase a device for every student. So every student will have access to a Chromebook. And at this most recent meeting, prior to our discussion regarding reopening, our board approved 6,000 hotspots. And we are also working with our community to make sure that Wi-Fi is available for our families. So you start with the tool or the device that we're all using right now to participate in this meeting, and then the single platform that will allow access for all of our students, and then the support for that. So making sure that we're providing support to our students, but also support to our families so that we can be interdependent and mutually accountable, you know, so that you can go in and check on your child's assignments. Also, one of the things that you probably have seen for new families that are coming, and you will see tomorrow as a launch for returning families, is our online enrollment portal, which is part of Power School, which means that Power School interfaces very closely with Canvas. So as a parent, you can go in Parent Portal and you'll be able to see as teachers are uploading and integrating their grades, so you can monitor your child's academic progress, which I think is critically important because you are an advocate for your child. And the last piece that I'll talk about before we get to the social and emotional learning is some consistency with scheduling. What you experienced a couple of things. One, the state wasn't ready either. And so they were providing us guidance and trying to make sure kids were graduating. There wasn't clear consistency around attendance. We were told we could only provide supplemental learning. There were equity challenges that we wanted to make sure, not just in Durham, but also across the district. So that is not what you're going to experience. Our remote instruction is not going to look the same. There's going to be a consistent schedule that your child will need to attend to. At a minimum, there will be 3 days where your child will receive that live instruction. And that is at a minimum. So that's just the baseline. As we work with many of our schools, whether they are on a period day or thinking about acceleration and intervention, there will be more. So students will have a schedule from their school where they will be required to log on and have an experience very similar to what we're experiencing. So at the high school, it might be block 1, but at elementary, it's going to be your literacy block, and you're going to log in, you're going to see your child's teacher, and you're going to engage in activities. When you get your Chromebook, you're also going to get your child's activities. So at the elementary level, you're going to get your Eureka book. The high school level, you're going to get information from StudySync. On Wednesdays, we're going to have Wellness Wednesdays, and that's our commitment at a district level. I'll let Dr. Maddox Perry and Mr. Futrell speak to that, but know that it's our commitment to meet our children's academic needs, but also their social and emotional needs. So our counselors and our social workers can connect with our students. Advisors can help our children with employability applications, scholarship applications, and going to college. We can have small groups with our children so that they can feel kind of the energy that we're now feeling from the screen that they're lacking with being with their peers. And Fridays are flexible. So you might have intervention groups where students are meeting together to work on a particular topic. That's going to be where groups that are working on a project, they would meet on Fridays because they can't meet at lunch to work on a collaborative project. So they'll meet on Fridays. That's where we'll have acceleration opportunities. So when we need to push some of our students that are in our honors and international baccalaureate and AP classes, teachers can work with them on Fridays so that we can make sure that students have everything that they need. Clubs and other activities will also meet on Fridays. Many of our high schools are already having conversations. I know that there's a parent meeting, I think, coming up at Jordan over the next week or so. I think I think Riverside has already had their initial parent meeting. Our high schools are a little bit further along, but be rest assured that prior to August 17th, you will know your child's teacher, you will have your child's Chromebook. If you need a hotspot, you will have that, and you will have your child's schedule. I know we're running out of time. I get really excited because we're working so hard. Let me turn it over to Dr. Maddox Perry to see, or Mr. Futrell, if they have anything to add about social emotional learning.
That was great. Thank you. Dr. Futrell or anyone else want to piggyback on that real quick?
Of course, this is James, everyone. I apologize, first of all, for not being able to show my screen this time. I'm in transit, but did want to just share a little bit about social emotional learning and what that means in our remote learning platform. So connection is important. It was important. One of the most significant things when we think about the learning impact among our students. And so to continue that, it's going to be important that we establish some of those same structures, but just in a virtual setting. And so when we think about establishing norms and how students interact with each other, those things have to still be developed even in a remote learning environment, so that there's a sense of trust, that students feel valued, that it's a safe space. There's very much an equity focus when we think about, for example, even though my screen is not showing right now, but we've had conversations about students when they turn on their camera and you're allowing someone into your home. And what does that mean for a student to be able to trust the teacher, the classmates around their safe space that many of them have the most impact with? And so we thought through some of what that means and ways in which we can communicate this across the district. We are going to utilize a scheduling component where we have Wellness Wednesday, but we just don't want to think about this as a one and done, because these things have to happen every single day, every single time, every minute that our students are engaged in the remote learning process. But through a thematic approach, we hope that each week we are leading ourselves as the adults, because we understand how important SEL is for the adults, but also as we model that effectively for students, because this is new for everyone and we want to certainly experience this in the most positive and productive way. But we do want to just make sure that students are visible, that we acknowledge them and their community, that we do learn to interact well with each other in this new environment, and give students the space to talk about how they're feeling, how they're being impacted, the loss of social connections that have occurred during this time, and really provide a space where reflections are occurring and adults can respond to students and how they're feeling in a very thoughtful way. Is going to be significant. And so Wellness Wednesday is a definite time in which we're naming what we are expecting, but this has to happen every day and every minute, and we expect that to be part of one of the most significant pieces in terms of really having a positive impact on student learning at this time.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We have reached our time, y'all, but I'll be back because there's more questions. So we're just gonna let Ms. Laura Parrott, I think, is gonna pick up. Yeah, it's almost your time, get ready. It's almost, I think, Charity, is this where we jump into the group conversation?
Nope, we have one more, we have a few more vignettes to show you guys. And again, I would encourage everyone to use the chat feature to share any thoughts or reactions. And again, if there are none, then my question to everyone would be, how will they help create a conducive environment based off the things that are going to be shared? Okay, so we will start the vignettes.
Hello everybody, my name is Landon Futrell. I'm currently a rising ninth grader going into Riverside High School. I just left Githens, which is a middle school. And I'm here to talk about advanced academics as a student of color. So in the second grade, I was actually tested for AIG and I got into AIG. So in my elementary school experiences, I was in academically advanced classes and I was really good at math and science. So with my math and science being as good as it was, I got really good test scores. And so with those test scores, my teachers introduced me to a program called Boost at Duke. I got into Boost at Duke and I really had fun. Boost at Duke is a program for 6th graders to 8th graders. Going through that program, I got to meet some pretty cool people who had connections to get me enrolled in other STEM programs. Once I got into those STEM programs like Spark and whatnot, I got introduced to even more. So then I could pick and choose which ones were good for me and that focused on math and science like Duke Tip. Some of those programs were full of multiple races so I can like socialize and whatnot with multiple people and become friends with everyone. And some focused mainly on Black and brown students like me. So with that being said, STEM is a good program. Thank you.
You know, as a Black male, you know, reflecting on my own academic experiences, you know, access to advanced academics was a challenge, right? It was, you know, I went to Jordan High School in Durham, and I don't know the percentages, but there weren't very many Black students in the AP or honors courses, and certainly weren't very many Black males at all represented in advanced academic settings. I remember one year in particular where I was in AP English, and the first couple of days being the only Black male in the entire room. There were a few Black women as well, and it was, you know, really uncomfortable. The teachers' sort of lack of cultural competence, the lack of understanding of the nuances when we're reading through the literature, really made it uncomfortable, so uncomfortable that I requested to be moved down to honors English, which is the level just slightly below AP, and so that I could be around my friends, right? So I could be in an environment where there were more Black students, where the teacher, the honors English teacher was actually a Black woman as well. Just had a higher level of cultural competence in the context of the literature that we were reading was provided in a way that we could really understand it. But ultimately, the work wasn't rigorous enough for me, and I got bored and asked to be moved back up. Fortunately, the principals and the school administrators were accommodating, and I was able to move back up to AP that year, but never really got the best, I never really had the best experience or got what I needed out of that advanced level academic course. And so I think there's challenges in how we assign or how we assess Black male students, and you know, we need a lens that's steeped in racial equity, that understands the cultural nuances of Black students, so that we can properly assess who gets placed in AP and honors. But also, once we get there, we need educators who understand those cultural nuances and who can create an environment that's comfortable, accommodating, and culturally competent, so that Black students, particularly Black males like myself, can thrive and can get what we need out of the literature. And that goes into the stories that we select, the texts that we read, this whole concept of window versus mirror text, books that we can see ourselves in or relate to, were really rare in my experience at AP English at Jordan High School. And in conversations with current students, that seems to still be the case. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of culturally competent assessment tools as we assign kids to the advanced academic courses, but also culturally competent environments so that we can retain those students, but more importantly, give them the academic rigor that they need, but also ensure their success.
All right. So again, I saw a few comments, shout out to Landon, but again, this is just an opportunity for any of the DPS staff just to kind of just reflect or share your thoughts on the vignettes that we just saw. And if we don't have any comments, we're going to kind of keep moving right along. Are we good? Thumbs up? All right. So next, right before we segue into the 5-minute intentional sessions with Millicent, we are going to, there's a link for the evaluation that we would like everybody to complete before they leave. So yeah, I think, Millicent, I am turning it all over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Charity. Hi, everybody. I'm Millicent Rogers. I have a rising 4th grader at Club Boulevard Elementary School, and I'm here to introduce the next segment. In the last workshop, we got an understanding from DPS that there's a breakdown for K2, where they're early learners and they're getting adapted to the social and emotional norms of public schools. And so we've asked for the breakdown of access to advanced academics to come in these steps. And so we'll address the K2, and then we'll address 3-6 for AIG assessment. And the start of standardized testing begins and portfolios are being built. And then for 7th through 9th graders, this is where students begin to be placed on college tracks and begin to have access to advanced and honors courses. And then we have a breakdown for 10th through 12th graders. And so this is the point in their development where there are college preparatory counseling conversations and development, and attention to GPA and weight of courses begin, so that students and families begin to have an understanding of what those AP courses mean when they develop access to college standards. So now, I guess, Ms. Parrott, you're going to give us an update on that from DPS.
Yes. Great. Thank you, Ms. Rogers, so much. And certainly, if we forget anything in that list that you were just going over, please do not hesitate to stop us and ask for clarification or for us to expand upon that. So looking at that K2, that is our investigations program, where every kindergartner, 1st grader, and 2nd grader in the district is served by AIG. And that is part of our response to how are we ensuring that we are cultivating potential in every student. And so by doing that, the AIG specialists are able to go into classrooms and present whole group lessons so that they are watching all, and when I say watching, observing the students. How do they respond? Are they making connections? And modeling some of the strategies that they use for the higher order thinking for the classroom teachers. And together, the students looking at how they did, the responses that they gave, then their small groups are able to be formed from that. So that's a little more of an intentional group. That is not to stay throughout the school year. It is designed so that the specialists continue to go back in and that those groups rotate so that as students show growth, as they show creativity and higher order level thinking, that they're able to transition in and out. Transitioning out never means that a child doesn't need it. It may just mean that it's a time for another student to have that opportunity. So during that time, we are really looking, as we said, past some of the behaviors that sometimes teachers may call non-teacher pleasing behaviors, that child who always wants to raise their hand, who's very quick to blurt an answer out. And unfortunately, classroom teachers do not always see that as signs of giftedness. And so this is an opportunity for specialists to work with classroom teachers to really help them see those characteristics of gifted students and to look past some of those misunderstandings. And then in second grade, we do the universal sweep screen where every second grader is tested, and that's the cognitive abilities test, or what we call the COGAT. Unfortunately, this year we were not able to finish that testing because of the stay-at-home order. We were right in the middle of testing when all of that occurred. So we do have an agreement that we will be able to continue to test those students. They will be tested as third graders. And of course, that right now hinges on our coming back to school face-to-face at some time during the year. So in the absence of the COGAT, we do have many other ways for students, and I did see that in the question. Many other ways that students will be able to be recognized for their academic talents. As you mentioned earlier, we do use portfolios so that students can be advocated for when a test score is not what the district criteria is set for. We know that we have children who overanalyze questions and therefore sometimes do not finish a test or choose a different answer because of their reasoning. We want to be able to recognize and honor their academic talents in other ways, like we said, through the portfolios. We also have the district advocacy. I believe you said, Ms. Rogers, your child was at Club Boulevard, is that correct? And so Club Boulevard, I will tell you, has been the leader on district advocacy, where a child may not have those standardized test scores, but they gather a portfolio, they gather together letters of support from teachers that show concrete examples, and then they advocate to a district level committee so that we are able to get them identified. So moving into the 3rd through 5th grade, that's where we're able to really begin focusing on those identified talents in reading and math. And so I'm gonna let the next person speak to that.
All right. Yes, I think Ms. Ward Satterfield, if you could speak a little bit about counseling and as students transition into middle school. Thank you.
So I'll do that part. We know that those transition years are very important in a perfect world. And in this world, we have a pandemic we are all concerned about and trying to make plans to ensure that our students have the best transition possible. And when I say transition, I mean between 5th grade moving up to 6th grade, and then 8th grade moving up to 9th grade. So specifically for that transition from 5th grade to 6th grade, I'll just talk about that a little bit. So your 5th grade counselor and 6th grade counselor work very closely to talk about times where these middle school counselor can come and visit with the classes, share information about the registration process and all of the courses that are available at the middle school, but with a laser focus on courses they'll experience in the 6th grade. They also want to make that information available to parents so that you can get a feel of it, because it's a mixture of choosing courses that you have to take, those core courses, and then courses that you want to take, which are your elective courses, and then being able to see the range available for those core courses even in middle school. And then middle school counselors work with the data that they get from students, from the elementary school teachers, from Power School, to help make sure that students have access to the rigorous courses that they may want to take. And then in the absence of that information, that's where we do our aggressive recruitment. We use the data, we investigate, we try to narrow down on student interest to suggest rigorous courses for them that they may not have thought they were qualified or able to take. And I want to touch a little bit on, because we heard that there was a question about how did course selections happen during the school closure because of the pandemic. So in our district, we have a registration process. We have a systemic approach to a registration process that's guided by a timeline. So because of this timeline, we know that the hardest hit students, well, I should say the students who were most interrupted in their registration process were students at those transition levels, because many of those activities were slated to take place during the end of March and the beginning of April. So once we realized that, we brought our transition counselors, 5th grade, 6th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade, all of those counselors together on a call to make sure that we knew what was missing, that we knew who each person had to communicate with, that they could share exactly what had been done at their schools, what had been shared, what had been collected. We quickly realized that we had a lot of registration forms that were out and that we weren't going to get back. And so schools had to scramble to create digital methods to collect that information, course selections and requests back from students and families. And then we know that we did not get all of those back. So when counselors realized that we were not going to be able to gather that information back from certain students because we were unable to communicate with them, then that's where they used their professional judgment. They looked at what was required to be a student in middle school to meet those high school graduation requirements. We used data that we had access to, predictive academic data, current Power School data, to create course selections for them that would put them in the best situation possible coming back into the new year. And then each school will have a drop add period so that families can more refine those choices if they're not satisfied with those.
Okay, and I think Ms. Moffitt, if she's prepared to speak a little bit to the next grade band.
Yes, so I'd like to share a little bit about middle school mathematics in particular, because middle school is where we start to see some divergence in course selection for mathematics. And so it's the first time that we have to navigate this as parents and students for choosing the right math course for our students. So I just want to echo Ms. Sidbury's comments about our parent guide that will be published shortly. I've noticed some questions in the chat with regards to understanding sort of the course sequence and progressions, and that will be represented for all core subjects, math, English, science, social studies, in that parent guide. So a few things that we can clarify and highlight about the middle school mathematics experience. As of 2016, we were able to redesign and reorganize our curriculum to eliminate the plus track in middle school. So it's not a track that students enter in 6th grade and are either on or not on. Our plus courses in 6th grade and 7th grade are designed that they're not prerequisite for one another. So a student, for example, could take Math 6 in 6th grade and still take Math 7 plus in 7th grade. So we accomplish this by having those plus courses teach the entire grade level curriculum in a compacted pace, and then adding on the plus standards from the following grade level. So students don't miss out on any content, even if they were to take Math 6 followed by 7 plus. Additionally, the advanced course option at each grade level in middle school can be clarified. So in 6th grade, students have the option to take Math 6, and the advanced option is Math 6 plus. In 7th grade, students can take Math 7, and the advanced course option is Math 7 plus. In 8th grade, students can take 8th grade math, and the advanced course option is Math 1. There is no longer an 8 plus course. It is not in our course guide, and it is not a course that we offer. So the advanced course in 8th grade is Math 1. So if your student is ready for an advanced course option in 8th grade, that course is Math 1. And we do have a curriculum designed for 8th graders taking that Math 1 course to make sure that any gaps in the 8th grade content are filled throughout the year that they're covering the content for Math 1. So that's sort of the highlights of the middle school mathematics course progressions and the selection options. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to either Ms. Ward-Satterfield or Mr. Futrell to talk about the transition up to high school from there.
So I heard when we were opening up this segment, right, that when we talk about that 10th through 12th grade span, we talk about college and ensuring that students have what they need and understand what it's going to take to make them eligible to attend the college of their choice. So as we've stated several times before this evening, one of our overall goals is to increase access to honors classes for all students. And in increasing that access, we also have to help students believe that they are prepared and ready to participate in those honors courses. So that all of that has to work together. So with honors courses, usually lead into students taking AP courses. Honors courses give a student a 0.5 quality point. And this might get a little technical. So some of you who have had high school students before, I know that you all will rally around the parents who are new to having high school students to understand how that transcript looks. But for instance, if you are in U.S. history, just standard U.S. history, and you get a C, then that C, which is, 70, 75, something like that, that course would be worth a 2.0 on your transcript, okay? If you are in honors U.S. history and you get a C, on your transcript, that course is worth a 2.5. If you are in AP US history, and all three of these kids could be in the same school during the same school year taking these three different courses, if you are in AP US history and you get a C, then on your transcript, that course is worth a 3.0. So that is why it's very important to understand, talk with your school counselor, and understand the impact of taking standard courses versus honors courses versus AP courses, and really tailoring those decisions to your students' strengths and interests. And then while pushing them a little bit to try something that they had not considered. It's also important to note that honors options are also available in our CTE pathways. And some of those courses, like our Project Lead the Way courses, are inherently AP weighted. So your students have an opportunity to get rigorous courses rigorous coursework and the quality points related to that outside of just the core academic courses.
All right, so that concludes, our portion on those different grade bands. At this time, I would yield to Dr. Hardy if she has anything that she would like to add, and if not, we should pass it back to Ms. Gunn.
Just want to say thank you to our team. I think there is a plan regarding the questions in the chat, and I know we've responded to some, but not to all. I want to make sure that we are honoring the organizers of the meeting. I think Ms. Sidbury has one thing that she would like to add, and then I think I turn it back over to Ms. Gunn. And then I don't know if there's time in the agenda. We do have 2 board members to give them the opportunity if they have any comments. Ms. Sidbury?
Yes, I just wanted to bring up a couple of notes in terms of we've given you a lot of information, and we have been working very, very hard to eliminate these gaps. And I just wanted to kind of summarize some of the key things that we focused on. Number 1, focusing on professional learning, making sure we start with the why and why these changes are appropriate at every level, including our administration, our central office, our research and accountability department. We're having these conversations very loudly about the why, because if we don't change mindsets, the practices will still fall short. So wanted to bring that forth. Number 2, making adjustments to our curriculum, making sure that we eliminate those gaps so that we do not create gateways that keep or harm students, making sure that we have ways, if they did not have the opportunity to take an advanced course, say at the 6th grade, that they are not penalized, they are not missing anything, there's no ground to catch up. So we've intentionally designed our curriculum in every angle to accommodate for this adjustment. Also making sure we're grounded in the data. A lot of our practices were largely rooted in adult beliefs and adult recommendations, and we want to make sure we stay grounded in what does the data say, and that we start there first, and we add on the additional support from the adult input as a way to include and not to exclude. And then lastly, increasing our awareness and the communication. We've been working on these things, and we want to make sure we get the word out there. And so that's why we want to be very transparent, make sure you have access to that waiver form, and make sure that on August the 3rd that we bring forth our parent recommendation guide and get that out, spread widely, because we want to make sure that everyone knows that we're doing this work. We welcome all students in advanced courses, and we are hungry to get all of our students to advanced courses. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hardy, and then.
I'm good. I think it's Ms. Gunn now.
It is my turn, definitely. I want to say thank you for that. I think that it was definitely really informative and very educational, and I definitely think that our parents are going to be able to navigate those transitional years a lot better. And we will be sharing with them, definitely for people who couldn't be here today. Again, before we are done, please complete the evaluation link. It is in the chat box. And now we are going to have an opportunity for Q&A. And this is when our readers will be able to read the questions aloud that were sent to them. And then it'll be an opportunity for the district staff to address those questions that were being answered. So Robin, do you have any questions that were sent to you?
No, I forwarded all the questions to the reader. If we want to start with Michael Jeter.
Okay, let's start with Michael. Okay, let's start with Michael Jeter.
Okay, so before I ask my question, would any of the board members like to make a comment or statement before we go into the tail end of this meeting? I can't see everyone, so I mean, is anyone saying yes? I don't, no.
Yeah,
okay.
I think I'm gonna.
Did I miss that? Sorry. Okay, my question is, Robin, I missed it. Hold on, I gotta scroll up. Okay, so given the realities that we know are real, that many children are not being offered access based on the counselors and their maybe preconceived notions about appropriateness, how should parents advocate to ensure that the children they know could succeed or should be AIG advocate against maybe not being referred or against the opposite of what we heard is happening at club, if it's happening in their schools?
Ms. Parrott, do you want to start? And then
I'm happy to respond to that. Thank you so much. So, Ms. Jeter, definitely, if you feel that something has not happened in that regard, where maybe a teacher has not followed through with completing that portfolio, then definitely have that opportunity to talk to them. Again, the AIG specialist along with the classroom teacher. I think that sometimes when we talk with parents, what we hear is that some of our miscommunication happens at the level with the classroom teacher. And sometimes it's because they haven't learned the process yet. And that is our responsibility to continue to educate them. So please reach out to that classroom teacher as well as the AIG specialist at the school. If that doesn't work, then we do welcome you to reach out to us. We want to help be a part of that process.
I echo that. I just add, if at the upper level, say upper middle school or high school, that it feels like the counselor is being a barrier to access, it could be for several different reasons. I would encourage the parent to first have a conversation with that counselor to ensure that the students, what the student wants to do after high school is clear, right? So that the classes that they're in now are aligned with where they see themselves after they graduate. Are they going to four-year college? Are they going to community college? Do they want to take a gap year and do community service somewhere? But a lot of times that's the first step, is to make sure that the parents, students, and counselor all have a shared understanding of what we're getting ready for. I think if that shared understanding can be met, or if it still seems like there is a barrier after that conversation, then I encourage the parent to talk to the building level administration.
And just to summarize really quickly, I know you got multiple questions. I think that either Dr. Bullock or Dr. Pittman, we can make sure that we do have a parent communication ladder that is on our website. We want to make sure that our parents have that. We always want you to start with your teacher and your counselor. We have a responsibility to continue to work with our counselors. So we talked a lot about the professional learning Dr. Bullock has provided to our teachers regarding that professional learning, our first phase at the beginning of the year, and then spring semester. Ms. Ward Satterfield and Mr. Trell have done a lot of work with our counselors. We've had Dr. Angel Harris from Duke University to really start to begin that work. So know that we know we're not there yet, but we are working to begin to change the mindsets, because we do have some places where we can improve. And if you are not getting what you need, as you work through that ladder, we want to make sure the final step of that ladder, you have two of them right here, are two of our board members, and they hold Dr. Mavinga and myself accountable in making sure that we are really being thoughtful in terms of access. So it's important to us. I spoke to 3 parents today, and I take that very seriously when we're not able to meet your needs, because that's important to us and it's important for your children.
All right, thank you. And now I'm going to have some questions read by Ms. Francis.
Hi, my question is, given the absence of the universal screeners like BOGs due to COVID, how will DPS address reaching students for academic advisement for the coming school year?
So I'll speak to that briefly, and just, one of the things that, unfortunately I say this a lot now, is I don't know. And I have to say that because there are still finalizing how we will handle assessments, given many of our school districts are starting to make decisions to begin the year remotely. And we do work in partnership with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And so at this time, we are still awaiting guidance regarding how those assessments, if those assessments, when those assessments would be administered. Typically, they are administered face-to-face, oftentimes paper pencil, in a classroom setting with multiple children and adults, and all of those kind of are not in alignment with how we are beginning school. So if you will give us some time to continue to gather updates from DPI, and please note that as we hear those updates, we share updates regarding our reopening, and I was going to say I think it's every board meeting and every work session. I don't feel like we missed one. So please know that that is our intent. And as we gather information, we're more than happy to come back. But at this time, we don't know yet.
Okay. All right. I think Dr. Rhonda Taylor Bullock has a question.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. The question is, can we advocate in this space for those virtual open houses to happen after the devices are distributed? Someone mentioned, like, you can't attend a virtual open house if you are in need of a device.
Dr. Bullock, thank you very much for that feedback. We are in the process of working with our information technology and our principals regarding device arrival and deployment, and also regarding virtual house scheduling. Most of that will be occurring, we think, for traditional and year-round families, because now we are aligned to one calendar, the week of August 11th. I think that's the Tuesday. So I received that feedback, and give us some time. I know that we've got about 30,000 devices that I think are going to be arriving at the end of this month. And so if you'll, that is duly noted, because we do want to make sure families have the opportunity to meet their child's teacher and principals, and many families may be in need of that device and or hotspot to make sure they do that. So thank you very much, and we'll definitely take that into consideration as we're finalizing planning for the opening of the year.
Awesome. Thank you. So does Micah Anderson, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question from a parent who did a waiver process but was still denied for honors math. So what should a parent do in that situation?
So if you can make sure that that parent connects directly with Dr. Pittman or myself as soon as possible.
Okay. And we're going to keep just rotating the questions. So back to Dr. Francis.
Sorry. Yeah. So my next question is, what is it planned for Chromebook distribution?
So schools will be deploying their devices. Most of them will be deploying their devices the week of August 11th. And so you will hear directly from your school, very similar to how you would hear about open house. Our early start schools, we have 4 early start schools: Hillside New Tech, CMA, Middle College, and Early College. And their first day of school is August 7th. They will be deploying, their teachers come back, I think, August 3rd. That's all from memory. Our calendars are posted. So there is okay, Chanel says I got it right. There's a possibility that I might have missed a date, but they are on the district website.
Awesome. So then we'll go to Dr. Rhonda Taylor Bullock again to see. I think she has a few more questions.
It doesn't look like I have another one. We can bounce to someone else until I receive a new question in my inbox.
Okay. And then Micah, Micah Jeter, do you guys have any more questions?
The one question that I received was could you speak to a little bit about how parents are going to be supported in helping to support their children during this virtual learning experiment? The reality is that, you know, I'm not a teacher. I was, and I quit on purpose. Y'all don't want me doing that work anymore. But now my daughter is here, and a lot of us are working from home and, you know, two-fisting it, and we need some guidance, support, orientation. So are there any plans for that kind of support for parents as well?
I'm going to let Ms. Sidbury take that question.
Sure. So one of the things we want to do is get our students back to a sense of normalcy. So one of those things that we'll be providing families at home is a structured schedule that aligns to their school schedule, giving them guidance on tips, setting up the instructional area, setting up the expectations. We'll also, again, make sure you have access. Unlike in our remote closure that was kind of abrupt, we didn't have the proper planning time to set up two-way communication mechanisms that would allow us to effectively communicate teacher to teacher to parent, parent to teacher, student to teacher, etc. So Canvas will enable us to do that. Canvas also affords us the opportunity to progress monitor, check on how long students are spending on assignments, how much they are needing assistance with things, and that will be also available in Power Schools for parents to have an accurate account on a weekly basis on how their students are doing. In addition to that, when we have device deployment and device pickup, coupled with that device pickup will be things like their instructional resource guide for mathematics, their take-home read books, their core text that will accompany those resources. So we want to make sure that people, that all of our families have things in hand in addition to the Chromebook in the hotspot if needed to support teaching and learning, but also providing that guidance on a routine basis to our families and communicating two-way on the progress of our students.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm gonna ask Dr. Jeffers Francis to ask another question.
So another parent had a question about cultural bias in testing. How is that being addressed?
So I believe nationally, that is something that we would have to address, definitely statewide. I mean, Durham Public Schools enact assessments as required by the state in general statute. So I think that is a continued conversation. I can say locally, as we develop local measures in Durham Public Schools, there is a high scrutiny on assessment items. The diagrams we show, the pictures we show, the way we phrase questions, we highly scrutinize all of that information internally in curriculum and instruction. I think that that's a larger question. We are kind of tied to the mandates of state and nationals, but we are doing everything that we can internally to make sure we combat that.
I think we may be able to say, thank you, Ms. Berry, for that. I think we may also be able to say a little bit about the diversity of testing that we use to identify students as academically or intellectually gifted. So that's one of the ways that we try to mitigate bias in standardized testing in identifying students. So Ms. Parrott, I don't know if you would want to speak to some of the diverse measures that we use for students to have access to AIG identification.
Yes, thank you. So a very quick overview of that. When we do give the caveat, I think one of the important things to know is that we do not require a composite score. We are able to pull from that and use sub-scores. So for example, we can use a nonverbal. That has been very helpful to help identify students who may have a reading difficulty, but very high math achievement. So we have several versions of an ability test that can be used. Two of them are nonverbal assessments, and then a variety of achievement tests so that we have multiple avenues, like we said.
All right, thank you. And I think we have another question from Micah Anderson.
Yeah, this is related to the question about devices. Will there be any opportunities to train students and parents on these devices?
Sure. So as a district, we will be arming our schools with standardized resources. We'll also have a parent portal and parent resource page that has videos, help tips, as well as step-by-step guides on how to access things. how to use the device, how to troubleshoot. In addition to that, we will have a communication protocol. What happens when something's going wonky with your computer? Who do you call when you get locked out from a login? So all of that information will be a part of that orientation, student open house, and device pickup process.
Awesome. So I'm going to give people just a few more minutes to kind of ask any more questions because I'm not getting any more written to me. We have a few more minutes. We have about 4 more minutes to answer any kind of questions that people might have.
I have another question that came through.
Okay.
It's about, okay, so in middle school, there is 6 and 6+, but we recently heard of an accelerated math beyond 6+. How is more transparency happening around that?
So in particular, the compact course that you're referring to, we make sure that we analyze student data and create opportunities on a case-by-case basis. And I would say 98% of the time, a 6+, which is accelerating with both the 6th grade content and 7th grade content, is a good fit for students. There are some unique and isolated cases where students can go well beyond that. In these cases, students are entering as a 6th grader already really having mastered a good bit of the Algebra 1 or Mathematics 1 or Math 1 content. So in that case, we want to make sure that we advocate and provide unique opportunities for students because we don't want to just stifle them at 6+. So even if there's a case where a parent or a family feel that 6+ is not challenging their child, I encourage them to have a conversation at the school level with the teacher, find out what things are in place in terms of scaffolds and differentiation. Also, if they already know in advance that their students are coming in super duper accelerated, we do have isolated sessions where we provide additional assessments that can give us more data. But what we want to do is make sure that students have a passion. I'm a former mathematics teacher and AIG student. I want to make sure that students have passion for mathematics. And sometimes we lose that passion when we move forward full force without genuinely having that opportunity to divulge in our curiosity. So we do have other opportunities on a case-by-case basis, but we do make sure that we provide opportunities to differentiate on a case-by-case basis. So if there is a family that feels that they're not being challenged by 6+, we definitely want to make sure that we encourage and have conversations about what would be a most appropriate service match for that child.
Awesome. I want to thank everybody for asking some great questions and you guys answering them. So this was a great opportunity for us to continue to learn and build. So next, I would like to highlight and give this platform over really quickly to our board members that are currently joining us today. Ms. Lewis, you can go first.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn. This was an incredible forum and informative. I can definitely hear there's a lot of hard work and thoughtfulness around access to advanced academic, a lot of plans and things are going forward. It's just really happy to hear. So yes, I'm Jelania Lewis, newly elected and sworn in board member, but I started this work before. So as we did part 1 back in September, before I even filed to run for board, it was really important that we got to a part 2. And Ms. Gunn, Ms. Jeter, Ms. Rogers, Dr. Jeffers Francis, Mr. Anderson, thank you all so much. You did a great job and just really taking the baton and running with this in part 2 and all the things that were followed up. It's terribly important that we do get back to a sense of normalcy and that we also have grace with one another. Thank you all for your transparency and just, just being honest. We don't know. We're figuring this out. We're what did they say? We're making a plane while we're flying it. So again, just thank you for working so hard, for being so available, bringing out this dream team, Dr. Hardy, Dr. Bullock, Dr. Pittman, and Dr. Sidbury, and just all that you all are bringing to the table to inform parents and our PAC members. We want to continue to close the gap. We want to continue to be there for our kids and standing in the gap for those other parents and families who, whether a parent or guardian cannot or chooses not to, we're going to be there for each other. And we just think that this information builds us up for that and bring that presence for our community. And that's what is really needed. So thank you for the opportunity, acknowledging the board members who are here. Dr. Hardy, thank you for turning over. Ms. Gunn, I do want to allow board member Natalie Beyer to also make some comments if she would like.
Thank you so much, Vanya. Can you hear me, or is this device terrible?
It's okay.
It's tired like we all are. I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to come and listen to the concerns. The testimonials that they're shared are heartbreaking, because we know that all of our students are brilliant, and we don't always make the connections that we want. So I need us to all hear the brilliance of our staff and the fact that they need to hear from us. So if y'all have issues, if y'all have concerns, please stay in touch about this. Those will help us as we advocate for systems that break down inequity. We need to hear from our community and need to hear from y'all. Thank you for letting us hear your concerns and help serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Byers. Go ahead.
All right, guys, we have about 3 more minutes and then we are gonna wrap this thing up. So Giovanni, if you can finish sharing your screen, I have one more slide just to talk about our asks.
Okay.
Okay, so these are the asks. How are you addressing the impact of current policy and practices for access to advanced academics, including unintended consequences with racial equity? What strategies will address the immediate impacts? Which strategies address root causes of inequities? And how will you realign your work? The next accountability questions we have are, how will you evaluate and report impacts on racial equity over time? And what is your goal and timeline for eliminating racial inequity? How will you ensure internal and public accountability? Again, I know we don't expect you, the DPS, to answer those questions now, but we just kind of want to put those in your brain. And yes, Dr. Hardy, I will, I just saw your chat, I will send it to you in an email. But again, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I want to thank you for all of our DPS panelists and staff for joining us and answering your questions. I would like to thank our DPS board members for also joining us and taking the time out of their schedule to be here with us tonight. This was really great. It's really great to see that everybody is committed to ensuring that our Black students have a quality and a great education. And that is, you know, definitely inspiring to hear. But again, there is a mentee closing questions that we would like everyone to answer. The link will be in the chat box, and then use the code. Also, please don't forget to complete the evaluation, and then you can ask any, I think there's a chat feature that you can ask any additional questions that you have. And then if you're interested in knowing more about what EPIC is doing, please subscribe to our newsletter. We will link our website in the chat as well. And I really do want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And we came in under time by 1 minute. So good job, everybody. Thanks again.
Hey, Giovanni, you know how to save the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
Mine saves automatically.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and then recording, and I'm going to stop the recording.
Good job, everybody.
Where's the recording?